My name is Adrian Nanchev, and this channel is all about helping you become a remarkable entrepreneur. So click on the subscribe button below and press the bell icon next to it for the latest uploads. Now, capitalism. This is going to be a very interesting video. You've got to understand capitalism and how it works. If we were alive in the year 1817, 1517, or 1017, our priorities would be completely different. If we were born in the year 1517, we would have to worry about our crop, serfdom essentially. We would have to worry about the crop. We would have to worry about the weather. We would have to worry about how this cut, and I hope it doesn't like fester or anything like that. Gangrene. Ooh. We have to hope that the Lord doesn't go to war, and when he does go to war, why is he going to war? If we were alive in a different time, maybe 200 years from now, it might be slightly different, a lot more technological, no idea. But 200 years ago, priorities would be completely different. 1,000 years ago, priorities were completely different. The age that we live in, the age that you just so happen to be born in, and the age that you happen to be alive in, this is the era of capitalism. And the chances are it is going to stay that way for a long time, because through what is called the marketplace of ideas, where different concepts, theories, principles, notions are brought up and presented to the world, people can test it on its merit. An idea can stand on its own 2 feet, and will it work? They test it, they look at it. Capitalism has stood the test of time. And I remember an argument a few years ago saying that capitalism is the natural progression of things. And it's interesting to say that because a few concepts. Firstly, you can understand that today we don't have capitalism in its truest form. We have elements of what's called cronyism, where it is government colluding with big companies for the advantage of one or the other. Some would even argue that's fascism, where it's a union of corporations and state. Some would just call it corporatocracy, where the government, the proper role of government, is supposed to be a referee, not an active player. So when we see things like corporate welfare, and hear about companies taking it and subsidising, harvests or the production line, then what they're saying essentially is that government is helping to keep this company alive, and the company can't stand on its own 2 feet, acting in the free market and performing in its best, because really it's having its hand held by the government. And if that wasn't there, would that company be able to perform? No idea. So many variables, so many questions, no idea. Some would say yes, some would say no. I'll leave that to other conversations. But capitalism, in its truest form, is arguably what is called the Austrian School of Economics. There's a damn good book here, actually, How an Economy Grows and Why it Crashes by Peter Schiff. This video is not sponsored, but this book is really good, and it's quite simple to understand as well. So I highly recommend checking this book out to understand just the basic fundamentals of a proper economy and how capitalism truly can benefit everyone. Because what we have right now is what is called Keynesian economics, which is purely based on what's called money velocity. And money velocity is, imagine 10 people in a circle, and there's a £10 note here, and all I'm doing with that £10 note is just passing it on to the next person, passing it on. Or even, let's keep it simple, there's 2 people, me and somebody else, and this is a £10 note, and we're passing it between each other. And if we pass it between each other 1,000,000 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, if I do that 1,000,000 times, we are essentially millionaires. We're millionaires because on the balance sheet we have passed this £10, I have given this £10 to the person, and they're giving it back to me, 1,000,000 times. That's how Keynesian economics essentially works. Just by passing money around, money velocity, want maximum employment, regardless of what productivity is, want people employed to do stuff. Communism had a lot of Keynesian economics, because Keynesian economics is very friendly and very fuzzy, so it gets a lot of votes. What some economies were doing in the Soviet Union was arguably, well, a simplified version is one person digs a hole and the other person buries the hole. Maximum employment, but net productivity is zero. Now Yugoslavia is interesting because they were growing at roughly 7% in the 80s and 70s and early 80s. They were a bit different, but because of the Second World War, they gained their own independence. So they're a little different. So interesting note there. But capitalism, you want to look at what's called Austrian School of Economics. They go on the basis of investments, which is capital. Capital is like energy. Investments are used to spend on ventures that can increase their productivity, give you a return, and raise the standard of living. So for a prime example of this is a baker. A baker takes out a loan, let's say £10,000, to start a bakery. That £10,000 could be paid back over, say, 10 years at, I don't know, 10%. Let's keep it simple. He opens the bakery, he's doing his stuff, he's producing, okay, he takes that savings to start a business. That business then bakes bread. So he sells bread and he makes, let's say, 12% on that loan per year. So that means that he pays 10% on interest, and the rest of the 12%, which is the gross, would be, or part of the EDB even, that 2% would go towards the cost of the materials, labour, energy, paying himself, and other miscellaneous expenses, tools and equipment and stuff like that. Land, labour and capital, those kind of expenses. That money in the bank is used for increasing productivity, so more people can take out businesses that work and that survive in the market by their own performance, and pay back the money of the bank. The opposite to that is what's called consumer debt. Consumer debt is someone taking out money, borrowing it to buy a consumer good, like a holiday or a television or a car or even a house, or not necessarily a house, a chair or any other books or bookcase, right? Where I'm taking that money out of the system and I'm using it to buy something that does not increase my productivity. Certainly in a direct way. A laptop is a little different, for example, but let's take a car. I borrow £10,000, so that's a liability, and I spend it on a car. So I have £10,000 of debt, and I have a car, which is a liability as well. Petrol, fuel, insurance, or maintenance. That is a misallocation of resources. Because remember that the money that I borrowed from the bank is savings. It's an investor's savings, and that's resources that could be used to build a business. That's just taking money out to buy, to spend, and that is arguably Keynesian, because you don't want to take money out just to spend it and spend it over there, and you take it out and start a venture with it that pays it back and allows me an income. See, their savings goes to the business. I then start a business and sell bread. I then get an income from the bread, so I have an income and I pay back the loan. So when the loan is paid off, suddenly you've got a business from nowhere, or arguably nowhere. Savings are very important, but also it's worth understanding this key principle that no one seems to understand or even heard of, what is called the invisible hand principle. The invisible hand principle states that everyone pursuing their own interests will raise up a society, a community or civilization collectively as though an invisible hand is pushing it up. This principle has got nothing to do with divine intervention, so bear that in mind. Let's take the baker example again. The baker wants to get rich. What can the baker do? He can steal, he can swindle people, like selling shit bread. It'll work in the short term, but the free market will through economic forces, people will buy the bread, realise it's shit, and tell the people, don't go there, don't go there, don't buy from them, don't buy from them. So that business will work at first, but it will dive, because people will say, don't go over there, it's really terrible, don't buy there. Whereas if you produce it legit, so here's a loaf of bread, £1, thank you very much, it's working, they're satisfied, that customer has £1, but he wants the food more. So he values the bread more than the pound. So through a voluntary transaction, keyword there is voluntary, he gives them the pound and he gets a loaf of bread in exchange. And the baker, I've got loads of bread. I've not got enough pounds. I don't want bread. I'll sell you a bread for £1. Or that's what I want. I want the pound, not the bread. It's a voluntary exchange of goods. It's a value exchange for bread for pound. And the pound's a store of value. I must go on to that later on. So he sells the bread. He makes people happy. And he's raising their standard of living. Because now these people have access to food that they couldn't produce themselves. They could have, but they need to take out a loan, start a business, learn how to do a bakery, all that kind of stuff. Really long-winded process. Or they could just buy a loaf of bread for £1. This is why you see some people. This is why you see a lot of products in the store that are very cheap. That if you were to do it yourself, like this cotton shirt, this would have been about £2 or £3, like a pack of 5, or £5. £5 versus me having to grow my own cotton and like harvest it and like process it and get it on all this. Too much energy for compared to that's very expensive time wise. And it's just a £5 done. I got 5 of them like that. So the baker sells the bread, and the baker has a choice, or there's a few choices. He can either continue as he is now, selling a loaf of bread for £1. Nothing wrong with that. His choice is prerogative. Or he can then say, I'm going to take the business to the next level. Let's try and find another supplier of grain to give me more grain and or cheaper grain. So he can then sell 2 loaves of bread for £1. So suddenly the people can now buy 2 loaves of bread for £1. Their standard of living has increased because they can now suddenly buy twice as much bread for the same amount of money, or currency even. They can buy the same amount of money, same amount of bread for twice as much bread for the same amount of currency. Beautiful. Their standard of living increases. More food. Good for them. The baker could go even further and to say, I'm going to introduce new kinds of bread, new kinds of flavours. I'm going to have, say, sesame seeds in it, or I'm going to create pretzels, I'm going to create even donuts where there's jam inside it, or stuff like that. Or bagels. Then he sells at different prices. Some could be 10p, some could be £1 as well, some could be £3. He's providing much more food and much more selection and variety to his customers. He's enriching their life. So someone can walk into a bakery with £5 and come away with potentially 8 loaves of bread and a few dozen pretzels or something. Or they can go into that store with £1 and buy 1 loaf of bread and a few pretzels. Their standard of living increases. Business, the purpose of business is to increase productivity, to increase the standard of living, decrease prices by finding much more efficient ways, or increasing supply, or doing something to make the product cheaper in general, like cutting inefficiencies, getting rid of unnecessary expenses in the business, finding quicker ways to make the bread, or making more of it in bigger bulks, where the purchasing power is totally reduced. It's just like buy it in bulk. So their lives are enriched by getting more bread. That's the purpose of business, to increase productivity. And productivity is overlooked in Keynesian economics. They look at debt and consumption. They look at consumption and debt, and they don't necessarily look at productivity. Looking at things like factories, factories, production line, assembly lines, things like that, in all the different sectors. Cars, clothing, computers, plastics, paper, etc, etc, etc. The other side to understand fully is currency versus money. Now, originally, see, this is, when people talk about money being the root of all evil, completely wrong. They're quoting 1 Timothy chapter 1 verse 10, which is Paul or Peter, I think Paul wrote that one, and put it into context quickly. He wrote that chapter talking about how the early congregations of like the 1st century AD, this is roughly 40, 50 AD, he wants all the congregations to have a unified teachings and principles, and the people should not be misled by other worldly things. And what that Bible verse is talking about is he's saying that the sole pursuit of money will lead to injurious things. Where he's saying if you ignore your health, your family, your spiritual well-being, in the pure pursuit of money, you will be hurt. It's not evil, not like a villain in a top hat, it's just you will be hurt. You will fall over. If you ignore, for example, if you ignore your health for a prolonged period of time in the sole pursuit of money, you will have problems. And that's what it means. That Bible verse, depending on the translation and which different Bible you read it from, talks about the love of money leads to injurious things, not evil. It's talking about how the sole pursuit of money leads to disaster in your life. And if you only measure your happiness by money, then you may never truly be happy, because you're ignoring other emotional requirements that we have as humans. So it's worth understanding that. Now the purpose of money is interesting, because thousands of years ago, before any form of currency or money, mankind traded on what's called barter. And barter is, I've got a cow and I want a chicken, so how many cows worth of chicken? But this guy also, he has fish, but this guy doesn't want fish, he wants goats. So how do I get, how can I go from a cow to a fish to a goat to a chicken? But he wants 2 chickens. He wants 2 goats. So how many goats is worth a fish per? It's very muddled. In very basic primitive society, it works where the productivity is very limited. You know, there's like a handful of different kind of goods being produced. But in modern society, modern industry, modern world, no chance. It's far too complicated. There's no unit of measurement and there's no store of value. So what this meant was that the cow and the chicken and the fish is what's called the coincidence of wants. This guy wants chicken, but this guy doesn't want a cow. So how do you get around that? You invent a medium of exchange that can be above, so to speak, the livestock. So for example, 1 cow could be worth 2 pieces of gold, and 1 chicken could be 1 piece of gold. So you say to them, I want a chicken, here's 1 piece of gold, here you go. Different civilizations use different things. Some people use rocks, some people use seashells, some people even use I don't know what it is, like bricks of tea, stuff like that, in ancient China. But they use different, what is called a commodity currency, where they used a physical product, a shell for example, as a currency. And said, here you go, I want 1 of your goats, here's a shell, thank you very much. And they exchanged that shell for some other things. Now, gold and silver are the classical forms of money. Yeah, money. Because they do one thing what today's currency does not do. You see, money and currency needs to be a store of value. It needs to be fungible, meaning my tenner can buy the same stuff as your tenner, and durable. You know, the coins can last a long time. The plastic ones are generally quite tear-proof. Not very good when it comes to iron or fire, but generally quite durable. But currency lacks one other thing. Currency can be, fiat currency can be, I don't want to get ahead of myself, hold on now. Money is a store of value, meaning that over time it doesn't lose its purchasing power. Whereas currency, or as we have it today, fiat currency, meaning currency that is, in Latin, let it be, meaning that is a dollar because the government gives it the trust and the ability to be equivalent of a dollar. Gold holds its purchasing power. An ounce of gold today will buy you the same thing, or the same equivalent of things, as it did 100 years ago and 200 years ago. But currency can be printed away, what's called fiat currency, can be printed away through the central banks. So the governments can print off billions of pounds and billions of dollars, but they can't print gold. And that's how Keynesian economics is favoured over Austrian, because Keynesian is much more frivolous. We have some debt, just print off some more currency, and we can inflate the debt away. And that's what inflation is as well. Inflation is the expansion of the money supply. If we just print off more dollars and more pounds, inflation's increasing. And inflation is the percentage at which the supply of money increases. Imagine a pond getting bigger and bigger. So that compared to, say, shrinkflation. Shrinkflation and inflation and shrinkflation, interesting relation, where the cost of something will generally stay the same, but the size of this something will decrease. Because what the manufacturers are trying to do is, this is costing more pounds, so we will reduce the size of this box from 100 millilitres to 50 millilitres, but the price will remain the same. Shrinkflation. And there's an interesting story about this. I had a little experience about 2 years ago, roughly. My ex-girlfriend, she had some bottle opener. It was made of like a plastic, silvery plastic, and she said it was like 99 pence. And she said, look at this, the companies are ripping us off, making it cheaper and cheaper, but just as expensive and cheaper material. And in my head, I thought to myself, no, that is shrinkflation, not the companies ripping you off. Because the companies know that if they rip you off, you're going to complain, you're going to go to a watchdog, you're going to talk to other consumers and say, don't go to that shop, it's shit. And therefore, people will vote with their dollars by not shopping at your place. And that's important to understand. Reputation is important. So I thought to myself, that's not cheekiness, that's shrinkflation. But I didn't say anything. I don't really regret it either, because she had a bit of a toxic personality. But nonetheless, it was shrinkflation. When the products stay the same, products shrink, but price stays the same. So it's worth understanding capitalism. And this video's gone on quite long enough. I think that's quite a good stuff right there. So the question of the day is, what do you not know about capitalism? The stuff that I've just told you is very, very insightful. Not everyone knows about this kind of stuff. And just to know even a smidgen of that gives you a distinct advantage in the world. So what do you not know about capitalism? There's a lot that I don't know. I want to understand more, just more in general, just more of it, because it's very valuable knowledge. Understanding how economies work and how an economy grows properly, it's worth understanding everything. But that's the question of the day. What don't you understand about capitalism? So remember, if this is your first time to the channel, subscribe and click the bell notification next to the subscribe button for the latest uploads. And you'll see me again soon. How cool is that?